To another of the My Biology Teacher podcasts. I'm Mr. Doc, and today we are continuing our study of ecology with a quick lesson on species interactions. And basically what we're going to be talking about today is living organisms interact with other organisms all the time. And we know that because we've already started studying ecology. What we need to understand now is more specifics, about those types of relationships. So we're going to talk about the types of relationships. We're going to be able to look at a relationship and go, oh, that's the kind of relationship that we see there. And we're also going to predict the effects of change in the environment if something takes these relationships and throws them off balance. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. First off, there are three major categories of species interactions. The first of which is that of predator-prey, or a predation interaction. And that one's probably the most common. We've talked about that a lot when we talk about food webs, because that's what a food web really shows, is who's eating who, but in terms of where the energy's going. Interspecific competition we're going to talk about, and that's probably pretty self-explanatory. And then symbiosis. And symbiosis is a little more complicated because it's got a couple of different categories, but we'll get into it. So let's first talk about predator-prey. In a predation relationship, the species that is hunted or eaten is called the prey. And the species that's doing the hunting or the eating is called the predator. It's pretty simple. What we understand now, at least after we've done the Lynx and Hare lab, hopefully in class, is that the population of predators and prey are intimately related. For example, if we looked at the population of our hare in our Lynx and the Hare lab, the number of lynx was pretty low, so the hare was able to increase because there were very few predators. But as the hare increased, the number of predators, lynx, increased because there was plenty of food. And then somebody knocking on the door. And then what happens is that as the number of predators increase, the number of prey has to drop because they're being eaten. But when that happens, the predator starts to run out of food, so its numbers start to decrease. Well, once the predators start to decrease, the hare, or the prey, can now go back up again. So what we have is this sort of echoed curve. We have the prey going up and the predator sort of following, and then the prey going down and the predator sort of following. So we have these sort of interloping lines there. So that certainly makes sense, that if there's plenty of food, the population of the predator is going to go up. But as the population of the predators go up, the population of the prey is going to go down because they're all being eaten. But once they run out of food, the predator is going to die out. The prey has a chance to repopulate. Now, some predators have adapted because they want to be more efficient, right? It's sometimes hard to go out and hunt and kill and eat your food. So making it easier is an advantage. For example, spiders have adapted to form webs that trap their prey. That way the spider can come along and get it instead of having to go out and physically find the organism. Most of the time the organism that it's hunting finds its web, boom, gets stuck, and the spider comes along and has a nice little dinner. Snakes, on the other hand, could sit there and fight all day and not quite kill the organism that they're trying to kill. But if they bite them one good time with some strong venom, the venom will stun the prey and basically paralyze it. Then the snake is consuming the organism at its leisure. It's got plenty of time. But predators aren't the only thing that can adapt. For example, prey have the ability to become better prey in terms that they aren't easy to find. So I guess they're not as good of a prey. That's sort of a weird concept. To be a better prey means that you can't be as easy to eat. Anyway, an example of a prey being better suited for its environment would be that of a chameleon, the ability to change the color of its skin to blend in. It's hard to catch, but you can't see. And finally, a porcupine grows quills. Quills make it hard for something to get at it. It's going to get stuck. It's going to hurt. And of course, we think about ecology and we think about these interactions and we think, well, animals are the only things that interact. But a cactus has quills, and that is an adaptation to prevent it from being eaten. So it's basically the same thing, right? So that is adaptation and predator-prey. The next type of relationship I want to talk about is that of competition. In competition, two or more organisms are competing for the same resource. Now, because of this, some organisms have adapted to become better competitors. For example, if we have a rodent on the ground and he likes to eat the nuts off the ground, but then there are bigger animals and birds that are more adept at getting the nuts off the ground, that little rodent's in for some trouble. So what does it need to do? It needs to learn how to climb the tree. If it climbs the tree, it can eat the nuts at the top of the tree where they come from. Therefore, he's better able to compete. Okay? But in competition, the graph, if we were to graph a relationship of competition, it would look different, because let's take our mighty Colts. If they are winning, they're at the top of the graph, which means the team that they're playing is automatically at the bottom, because one team wins and one team loses. But as they go, they continue to win. But if we lose, we drop. But the team that we play goes up. So we're going to switch places. And that continues, and then we switch places again. In a competition, you've got a winner and you've got a loser. And if they switch back and forth. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. It didn't confuse you. The last type of relationship is that of symbiosis. Symbiosis is a relationship that is long-term between two organisms. We're going to talk about three types of symbiotic relationships: parasitism, mutualism, and commensalism. So the first one you probably are familiar with. Parasitism is a relationship between two organisms in which one organism benefits and another is actually harmed in the relationship. Now basically what that means is that one organism doesn't want the relationship, but the other one does because it's getting some sort of benefit. A flea and a dog, for example, is a parasite relationship, or intestinal worms to any organism, or a pig or something like that. Parasites that live inside an organism are called ectoparasites. An example of that would be a flea. And those parasites that live on the inside would be endoparasites. Now, at first glance, this seems a lot like a predator-prey relationship. You got one organism that's getting a benefit. But there are two major differences. Number one, in a predator-prey relationship, the prey is going to die. The prey is being eaten, and you can't be eaten and live at the same time. It's just hard to do. The other difference is that parasitism is a long-term relationship. If the parasite kills its host, and that's what we call the thing that the parasite is in or on, it's a host. If a parasite kills its host, then what benefit is it? It doesn't get the benefit. So a parasite has no interest in killing its host. That's not to say it can't. It's just that's not its intention. It doesn't go around trying to kill the dog or whatever organism it happens to be in or on. Because if that happens, then that organism is going to die because it loses its host. So the ideal parasitic relationship is one in which one is harmed but not fatally so. Okay. Now, that's not to say, like I said earlier, that parasites can't kill their host. If you get over-infested with parasites, then certainly death could occur. Another type of relationship is mutualism, and if you know what the word mutual means, this one makes a whole lot of sense. Mutualism describes a relationship between two organisms in which both of them actually get a little bit of benefit. An example of that, and probably the most common, is that of between insects or bees and flowers. Bees get nectar and pollen. Flowers get pollinated. Everybody wins. It's a win-win situation, in other words. Ants and trees. There are certain types of trees that have ants that live in the roots. The roots provide shelter and a habitat for those ants. The ants provide protection for the tree. It's a mutual relationship. We all have seen The Lion King and the elephant with the tusks and the But anyway, the birds that sit on the elephant's tusks aren't there for pretty. They help the elephant by eating the bacteria and stuck food matter from its teeth. The bird gets food, the elephant gets dental care. And why is that a benefit? Well, because if there's bacteria in the gums, it can go into the heart, cause a heart attack, the elephant's going to die. So that's a mutual relationship. Bird gets food, elephant gets dental care. Doesn't have to be in an HMO. Kidding, that's an insurance joke and you probably don't get it, so we'll move on. The next type of relationship is a commensalism relationship, and this describes a relationship in which one organism benefits and the other is neither harmed or helped. Now, there is no relationship name for a relationship where two organisms are both harmed, because why would you stay in a relationship if both of you are being harmed? It wouldn't make sense. It's just silly. So we really don't have a name for anything like that, and to be honest with you, I don't know of one. But this relationship is one in which an organism benefits, but the other organism could care less. It's not that big of a deal. An example would be that of an egret and a cattle. or orchids in a tree. Cattle egrets are these long-necked white birds that you'll often see in cattle fields. What will happen is the cattle will run through the field kicking up dirt, and also when they eat the grass they pull the roots up and it kind of tills up the dirt. The egrets eat bugs, and the bugs are kicked up from when the cattle walk or when the cattle pull grass out of the ground. So the egrets just go behind the cattle and eat the bugs. The cow doesn't care. It's going to do what it's going to do. The egret benefits because the cow's helping it out. That's a commensalism relationship. An orchid plants itself in the side of a tree. It doesn't hurt the tree. It doesn't take anything really away from the tree. It gets water trickling down the tree from rain, so it's not taking water away from the tree. So the tree could carry, tree's fine with it. The orchid gets not only a place to live, but protection from the tree. So that's certainly a benefit to the orchid, no danger to the tree. Another example that you might be interested in is that of the little feeder fish that follow around sharks. And you may have seen these on like the Discovery Channel where a shark is swimming through these little fish and the shark's looking for food. And you're like, well, why doesn't he eat those little fish? Well, number one, those fish are so little that the shark wouldn't really get any benefit. He'd have to eat hundreds of them just to get a good meal. So the shark doesn't care that they're there. He's not going to eat them. But these little fish have a hard time hunting, so they can't kill a fish that's bigger than them. So what happens is they follow the shark until the shark eats something. And when the shark eats it, it tears it up and little pieces kind of fly everywhere. And those little fish come and they eat the little pieces that are floating in the water. So the shark acts as sort of a food processor for them. It chops up their little food, cuts it into little pieces, and they come and eat it. Shark doesn't care. It wasn't going to eat that anyway. So they're kind of moochers in that sort of sense. So that's the way a commensalism relationship works. It is these relationships, now that we've covered all of them, that allow an environment to be stable. Okay, it creates a stable environment so that the environment is balanced. If these very delicate relationships are unbalanced, drastic things can happen in an ecosystem. And some things that can change those include density-independent factors like the climate, but also what if we introduce a new player into a competitive relationship or into a predator-prey relationship? If we change the dynamic of these relationships, then we can change everything, and usually not for the better. Okay, so what I want to talk about next, and this is the last thing we'll talk about, is alien species, because we mention it, because that is a way to break up the stability or equilibrium of an environment, which is very important, by the way, because if an environment is stable, it can withstand most changes. But if we throw off the stability by throwing in an alien species, and we're not talking about ET here, we're talking about a species that's not normally from there, we can do some pretty bad things. An alien or non-native species, which can also be called, by the way, an invasive species, is not from that particular ecosystem. So we have an organism that is moved from one place where it is native to a place where it is not native. These are often introduced by accident or just by carelessness, and most of the time it's due to human activity, and so it's our fault usually. But a non-native species can come into an environment and be better adapted at competing in that environment. So that means that it could outcompete the things that naturally live there. And that's often the case because if I'm in an environment, my environment's balanced, I have this sort of flow. So I really don't have to compete that much for my resources. Well, if a new player comes in and he's very competitive, then I'm going to have to step up my game. And if I can't step up my game, then I'm certainly in danger of being extinct. But as that organism, that species, starts to be more competitive, the amount of resources goes down, which means that the population that depends on that resource is going to go down. And then the population that depends on that population will go down. And then we've thrown everything off kilter. So, what is an example? Well, since we are in Indiana, let me give you the one that's probably closest and dearest to our hearts, and that of the little zebra mussel. A zebra mussel is a little bivalve. It's a little mussel, looks like a clam. The shell of it is black and white striped, and they are from Europe. But now they're in the Great Lakes. The problem with zebra mussels is that when they were moved here, there's no predator for the zebra mussel. Nothing really eats the zebra mussel. So that's a pretty big problem because what's going to control the population? The population of the zebra mussel just takes off, and if nothing's eating it, there's nothing really to put a cap on it and make it go back down, right? So that's a bad thing. Another thing is that they're very aggressive filter feeders, meaning that they suck the water in on one side and spit it out on the other and take everything in it. Plankton, organic particles, they're just taking it in by the boatload, right? So anything that eats plankton or those organic particles could be in trouble, especially if they're not as efficient as the mussel. Another problem with the zebra mussel, as if we need more, is that when they spit the water out on the other side, it's slightly acidic. So now we're changing the pH of the water. Well, that's bad, because what if the things in the water are very sensitive to pH? If the pH goes too low, then those things are going to die. Okay, another problem. Oh, how bad could it get? These organisms can attach to almost anything, sides of the boats, other mussels, so they literally attach to other native mussels and suffocate them, kill them, because they're taking up all their space, they're not exposed to water. So these things are very, very aggressive. They also attach to sewer pipes and all that other stuff, so they'll clog the sewer pipes. And you know what happens when a sewer pipe gets clogged? It backs up. That's a problem. So we spend millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars trying to clean this stuff up. So this is a pretty substantial problem. This is a pretty big problem. What can we do about it? Well, right now we have two things we can do. We can either try to remove them, and it's hard to do because then we have to remove all the offspring, and that's pretty tough to do. Or we could go to Europe and find the natural predator and bring him in. But the problem is we don't know what he would do. So if we bring in the natural predator, the zebra mussel, how do we know it wouldn't further destroy the ecosystem? So now we're in a bit of a problem. So how did this happen? How did the zebra mussel come into play? Did Dr. Evil hatch a little plan to bring the zebra mussel over and destroy the great... No, he didn't. It was perfectly innocent. What happened is big boats that carry cargo from here to there were in the lakes in Europe. They take in water. See, there's a big tank in these boats. They take in water, and it allows the boat to sink a little bit so that when it's going through the ocean, it doesn't swish and swash, right? That's called ballast water. It helps its buoyancy. That's the word we're looking for. And as it goes across the ocean, that's fine. Well, once to the Great Lakes, it needs to release that ballast water so it floats higher and it's easier to maneuver through the tighter waterways that aren't like the ocean. So it takes all that fresh water that collected in Europe and expels it, you guessed it, into the Great Lakes. So now all the little organisms, all the little things that were in that water in Europe are now in the water here in the Great Lakes. Now that we know that, we can prevent it from happening again, and we do. As a matter of fact, all ocean-going vessels that go from Europe or any other country to the United States must dump their ballast water in open ocean. Reason being is that if they've taken in fresh water and they dump it in the ocean, anything that lives in fresh water that goes in the ocean is going to die. And then they can take in salt water. Well, the salt water, when they dump it, isn't going to be a problem because anything that lives in salt water is going to die in fresh water. So that's a good way to fix the problem. But we didn't realize that was a problem until it was too late. So there we go. That is our little note on species interaction. We've identified the different types of relationships or interactions between species, one being predator-prey, very common, illustrated by food webs. We have interspecific competition where we're competing for the same resource, and we have symbiosis, which can be broken down into parasitism, which is where one organism gets harmed and the other one gets a benefit, mutualism, where both organisms get a benefit, and commensalism, where one organism gets a benefit and the other one neither is harmed nor helped. If we evaluate specific relationships, we know that a tick on a dog is a parasite because it's hurting the dog, but it's getting a benefit. If we look at your relationship between, let's see, a cat and a dog. The cat is the prey, the dog is the predator. Those are all relationships. And finally, can we predict what would happen if we introduced an alien species into the environment? Well, sure. The alien species might not be able to adapt, in which case it would die and would be okay. But if the alien species is more likely to adapt and be able to compete, then the native organisms either have to step up their competitive game or they're in a whole lot of trouble, meaning that their food source could be outcompeted, which means they're going to die. And every organism that depends on them is going to die. And every organism that depends on the one that depends on that organism is going to die. And it's the song that doesn't end. It just goes on and on, my friend. All right, so there you go. There's your species interaction notes. I hope it's helped. If not, you can certainly email me or you can talk to me in class. And I will see you next time. We will be beginning a new unit in just a little bit on biochemistry. I will see you then.